is CNN Breaking News.
Thank you for joining this hour. I'm Natalie Allen, live in Atlanta. Our top story, former FBI Director James Comey calls his former boss Donald Trump morally unfit to be president. That comment came in Comey's first TV interview since he was fired almost 1 year ago by Mr. Trump. In a new book coming out this week, Comey writes the president was untethered to the truth. And Comey told ABC News that Donald Trump is a stain on those around him.
Our president must embody respect and adhere to the values that are at the core of this country, the most important being truth. This president is not able to do that. He is morally unfit to be president.
Russia was also a big part of the interview, specifically whether the Russians had compromised Mr. Trump.
Do you think the Russians have something on Donald Trump?
I think it's possible. I don't know. I think these are more words I never thought I'd utter about a president of the United States, but it's possible.
That's stunning. You can't say for certain that the President of the United States is not compromised by the Russians.
Yeah, it is stunning, and I wish I wasn't saying it, but it's the truth. It always struck me and still strikes me as unlikely, and I would have been able to say with high confidence about any other president I dealt with, but I can't. It's possible.
Before Comey's interview aired, President Trump went on a Twitter rampage against him Sunday, accusing him of sharing classified information and lying to Congress and suggesting he face jail time. That would be Comey facing jail time. Let's talk more about it and get reaction on this interview. Joining me from Los Angeles, CNN political commentator and Republican consultant John Thomas, and Peter Mathews, a political analyst and professor of political science at Cypress College. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. A lot of people watching this interview. First of all, the former FBI director saying of this president, he's a serial liar, he's morally unfit to be president, and he personally attacks the president, his looks, hands, hair, ties. Peter, how did Mr. Comey come across to you?
He came across as fairly believable, actually, and I think 48% of Americans believe Comey and 32% believe Trump, so those numbers tell you something. I think that Comey has a reputable, past, and that really made him more credible. And I think that the people seeing it today, there'll be at least 1/3 of the people that will actually change their minds. 1/3 of the Americans have not made up their mind about Comey. They could be influenced by this interview.
Well, John, the words Comey uses to describe Donald Trump, Republicans themselves have used similar words. These aren't quite new. Many people have called him unfit, a bully, a fraud, unhinged. That's from his own party. So what's really new here? Many people call this book a bombshell. Was it a bombshell? Is it a bombshell? Or is this Comey just taking his turn?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this smacks of a disgruntled former employee who is trying to trash and burn the president with really no new information. And he does it, Natalie, in such a petty way. I mean, there are many things that reasonable people can argue about what you may or may not like about the president. But to talk about his tan lines and his hair and his hand size, it really undermines his argument here. And furthermore, the book title is that of a higher loyalty. If it really was to a higher loyalty and not just making money and getting a bigger book signing, he shouldn't have taken money at all to do this effort.
Well, let's dig deep into something that he said that's been resonating. Comey met early on with President Trump when he took the Oval Office, and Mr. Trump reportedly asked him, according to Comey, to lay off Michael Flynn, his national security advisor, who was later fired by the president. Here's Comey on that meeting.
Should you have said, Mr. President, I can't discuss this with you. You're doing something improper.
Maybe. Although, if he didn't know he was doing something improper, why did he kick out the Attorney General and the Vice President of the United States and the leaders of the intelligence community? I mean, why am I alone if he doesn't know the nature of the request? But it's possible that in the moment I should, another person would have said, sir, you can't ask me that. That's a criminal investigation. That could be obstruction of justice.
Was President Trump obstructing justice?
Possibly. I mean, it's certainly some evidence of obstruction of justice.
Peter, how serious is that statement there?
It's very serious because many of us hypothesized that, but to hear the former FBI agent actually come out and say that, investigating, that's more credible, and it has to do also with whether President Trump had the intent to obstruct justice. And Comey says there's a possibility that he did have the intent. We have to look more deeply into that. But I do believe this is a major problem for President Trump, for Comey to come out here and say it right up front. that he could be have obstructed justice when he did that.
Natalie, it seems very hypocritical of Comey to make that argument about protocol, because here's a guy who broke protocol left and right. One, he broke protocol by announcing a current investigation. You can't do that, right? He broke protocol by leaking anonymously to the press. I mean, he also broke protocol by saying that the polls influenced his decision of whether or not to reopen and announce the Anthony Weiner laptop emails. It just seems very hypocritical for him to accuse the president of protocol breach.
Well, President Trump fired Comey, of course. He has fired numerous others in his cabinet. He's currently threatening to fire the Deputy Attorney General, and through numerous news accounts wants to fire the special counsel. The implications, of course, would be grave. Let's look at a New York Times editorial, very long New York Times editorial. They wrote about this in its recent issue. It says, news reports point to a growing possibility that President Trump may act to cripple or shut down an investigation by the nation's top law enforcement agencies into his campaign and administration. Lawmakers need to be preparing now for that possibility, because if and when it comes to pass, they will suddenly find themselves on the edge of an abyss with the Constitution in their hands. The editorial goes on to point out that presidents are not above the rule of law. Do you think Donald Trump, John, understands that and is concerned about that when it comes to his, what is he going to do vis-a-vis Mueller?
Yeah, I think the president does understand that, and that's why he's repeatedly said that he is not going to fire Mueller. I think it's very tempting for him to dream about that outcome simply because he feels like he's being untreated fairly, and some could argue that he is. But I think the president understands the implications of firing Mueller would cripple his administration. I don't think he'll go that far.
Peter, back to you for a moment. What would be the one statement that Comey said that maybe stands out to you the most about President Trump and his worthiness to serve in that position?
That he is untethered to the truth and morally unfit. That's a huge charge. But back to John's comment, President Trump also said we're going to be withdrawing from Iraq, and the next thing you know, he's attacking Iraq with missiles. So he may not fire. It may be seeming he may not fire Mr. Mueller now at this point, but who knows what we'll do tomorrow or the day after. It's very difficult to understand what this president's really up to half the time. And that's a problem, John. It's the inconsistency which delegitimizes the presidency. It's not just him, but the institution. I think that's what Comey is talking about. That's what he's talking about, the rule of law.
John, you want to respond?
Yeah, I just was so disappointed to see Comey commingling his opinion and versions of the event. I think he would have been much better off if he had just said, look, here are the events that I witnessed verbatim, no opinion, judge for it on yourself. But instead, taking this holier-than-thou kind of revenge tour, I think really undermines his cause. And I just don't think if you like the president, you're still going to like him after this interview. If you hated him, you're going to be cheering at the screen. I mean, I just don't think this changed any hearts and minds other than hurting the credibility of James Comey.
Well, we will wait and see what the reaction is as he goes on his book tour and the book comes out, and we'll hopefully talk with you again. And all of that. This is America. Take it as far as you can go, right? John Thomas, Peter Mathews, as always, gentlemen, thanks so much. We appreciate your input.
Thank you, Natalie.